was it like on the set of Little House on the Prairie? The actress who played Michael Landon's wife says it wasn't as wholesome as it seemed.
Few shows have captured the warmth, hardship, and unity of pioneer life like Little House on the Prairie. From 1974 to 1983, the Ingalls family became a household name, with Michael Landon, Melissa Gilbert, and the rest of the cast bringing Laura Ingalls Wilder's stories to life in a way that felt timeless. But the end of Little House wasn't just another quiet farewell. Instead, it concluded with one of the most shocking moments ever broadcast on network television, and many couldn't help but wonder why. While it might have seemed like a dramatic plot twist, it turns out there's more to the story, and at the forefront was none other than Michael Landon. Over 40 years later, we're breaking down all the behind-the-scenes details behind the infamous scene, the feuds, creative battles, and the truth behind why Little House on the Prairie really went off the air. The chapter that changed it all begins with understanding why Little House on the Prairie had such an impact in the first place. Premiering in 1974, the show was adapted from Laura Ingalls Wilder's beloved books about her childhood in the late 19th century. But what could have easily been a simple family drama became something much bigger under the creative control of Michael Landon. He wasn't just the star of the show, playing Charles Ingalls, he was also a writer, director, and producer, and that meant he had the final say in most creative choices. Unlike many family-oriented shows of the era, one thing that stood out about Little House was that it wasn't afraid to touch on darker themes. The show portrayed pioneer hardships with startling realism: death, illness, racism, alcoholism, even addiction. Episodes often ended on bittersweet notes rather than easy resolutions, making it stand apart from other wholesome dramas on television. Many said they tuned in not only for heartwarming family lessons but also for moments that confronted life's toughest realities head-on. By the early 1980s, however, things began to change and the show's ratings started to slip. After nearly a decade on the air, audience tastes were shifting, and newer programs were competing for attention. NBC decided to end the series, though the network gave Landon the space to craft a proper conclusion. But what came next would shock viewers, not because of the storyline itself, but because of what it symbolized both on-screen and behind the scenes. The TV movie Little House, The Last Farewell, which aired in 1984, gave fans one final look at Walnut Grove, but instead of a sentimental goodbye, audiences watched in disbelief as the town was destroyed with dynamite. In the story, a greedy land baron claims ownership of Walnut Grove and tries to seize it from its residents. Rather than let him take their homes, the townspeople make a collective decision: if they can't keep Walnut Grove, then no one will. In a series of powerful scenes, families set charges of explosives and blow up the very buildings that had been the backdrop of nearly a decade of television history. For audiences, it was a stunning and emotional twist. The schoolhouse, the mercantile, even the homes viewers had grown attached to, all reduced to rubble in front of their eyes. It was unlike anything TV had seen before. After all, this wasn't just a fictional town, it was the physical set where actors, crew members, and fans had invested years of storytelling. What made it even more compelling was that the demolition wasn't a visual effect or a clever camera trick. Landon had actually ordered the set to be destroyed with real dynamite. Although the choice was bold, it wasn't random. For a while, Landon's frustration with NBC had been growing, and he had determined that Little House should go out on his terms. In his words, he didn't want to see Walnut Grove reused as a backdrop for another show or left to decay. So the smartest choice was to actually blow it all up. By doing so, he made sure that Little House ended with a definitive full stop, both in narrative and in reality. Cast members have since recalled that the experience felt like attending a funeral. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, later described it as a long goodbye, devastating, but strangely fitting. At the time, reactions were mixed. Some appreciated the symbolic farewell, recognizing it as a dramatic way of closing the chapter, while others felt it was unnecessarily violent, almost sacrilegious to destroy such an iconic setting. Fans who tuned in expecting a tender, nostalgic ending were instead confronted with explosions and loss, and for many, the memory of Walnut Grove going up in flames left them unsettled. Just like that, the finale became one of the most infamous episodes in TV history. But we can't talk about the finale episode and all the drama surrounding it without first touching upon all of the build-up to it, and to do that, we've got to ask ourselves a very important question: did Landon's shocking choice actually lead to the show being taken off the air? The truth is a little more complicated than it seems. While it might appear that Little House on the Prairie was cancelled because of this episode, or even Landon's creative choices, it was never pulled as a result of any of these. Landon had an awful lot to do with it, but the series itself had already wrapped up due to declining ratings, and the destruction of Walnut Grove was simply the best possible way to put a close to a story that had spanned years. Over time, memory has transformed the finale into legend. Fans have repeated the story of Walnut Grove's destruction as if it were a punishment from the network or as though the violence of the scene itself got the show banned. In reality, the finale was broadcast and even rerun a few times, but it didn't have the same longevity in syndication as other episodes. Networks often preferred to replay lighter, more family-friendly storylines. Considering the sheer bleakness of the finale, it meant it was rarely shown again, and over time, that absence fed into the myth that it had been taken off the air. But while the infamous demolition of Walnut Grove may have been the most dramatic on-screen ending, the true sparks of conflict came from behind the scenes. Before we get right into all of the drama and conflicts, let's quickly go over some of the quirks viewers might not have noticed. Even Little House on the Prairie, that emblem of frontier charm and familial warmth, had its share of quirky mishaps, tiny anachronisms, costume snafus, and odd moments that escaped the editing room. One of the most amusing timeline oddities involves Laura's pregnancy during Season 7. Viewers noticed that despite the warm, flower-blooming scenes suggesting spring had arrived, Laura remained heavily pregnant well into the following summer, prompting fans to joke that prairie time just moves at its own pace. Then there's the ever-iconic Nellie Oleson with her perfect curls. Fans might be surprised to learn that Alison Arngrim's golden ringlets weren't natural, they were wigs, secured firmly onto her scalp with metal combs and pins. The process was so grueling that some stories even say it caused her scalp to bleed on occasion. Perhaps the most hilarious blooper involves a time-traveling chicken magnate. In the Season 8 episode, Wave of the Future, Colonel Sanders, yes, the Colonel, appears to pitch a fast food deal in Walnut Grove. The problem? Cats, both the man and his chicken empire, didn't exist until the mid-1900s, long after Little House's pioneer era. Fans joked that the fried chicken on set may very well have been KFC. Not all errors were comedic time slips, some were practical blunders. In the holiday episode, Bless All the Dear Children, set in Minneapolis, characters walk around without coats because the show was filmed in scorching Tucson, Arizona. There were also costume slips, like glimpses of Caroline's modern-style bra, and hairstyles that looked more 1970s than 1870s. Men were mostly clean-shaven, clashing with the bearded norms of the era. On the action front, a dummy falls from a train during a stunt, a visible stand-in betraying even the most dramatic sequences. Not all behind-the-scenes takes were serious. Landon, snagged between takes, enjoyed pulling pranks, most famously involving frogs, causing giggles amid the strict pioneer world. There's casting trivia too. Sean Penn had his on-screen debut as Kid in Season 1's The Voice of Tinker Jones, and Jason Bateman appeared as James Cooper Ingalls. Even in the final 2-hour TV movie The Last Farewell, set in 1901, the residents barely looked a day older than their series characters, despite the years that had passed, subtly showing that time in Walnut Grove often stood still. But the fun thing about these bloopers and quirks is that they somehow don't distract, they charm. They remind us that producing a beloved period drama season after season is a living, breathing endeavor, and they give a glimpse of how even the most deliberate shows can hold a handful of delightful surprises hidden in plain sight. Now let's dive into the behind-the-scenes drama that threatened to overwhelm the show. Production and feuds. To understand why Little House on the Prairie ended the way it did, we need to focus on the people running the show, both behind and on screen, and the tension simmering beneath its wholesome surface. At the heart of Little House was Landon, far more than Charles Ingalls, the devoted pioneer father. Landon was the driving creative force. He wrote many scripts, directed countless episodes, and worked as an executive producer. Essentially, it was his show. He attained a level of control that allowed him to shape Little House into something often deeper and darker than expected from a family drama. But with that power also came clashes, with networks, producers, and even castmates. One of the earliest feuds was between Landon and Ed Friendly, the show's co-creator. Ed helped develop the series for television but soon found himself pushed aside. Why? Landon's vision differed from Ed's more traditional, family-friendly approach. Landon wanted to tackle serious themes and push the boundaries of what was acceptable for primetime audiences. Ed wanted the show to stick closer to Wilder's original books. Their creative differences escalated, and Landon's dominance on set meant Ed was effectively cut out. Although his departure occurred earlier, it signaled that Little House would be guided almost entirely by Landon's will. The conflicts didn't stop there. Landon's relationship with Karen Grassel, who played Caroline Ingalls, was especially complicated. On-screen, Charles and Caroline were steady, supportive, and loving. Off-screen, however, Caroline often felt sidelined and undervalued. She revealed struggles to get fair pay, claiming Landon refused raises matching other NBC stars. In interviews, she described feeling disrespected by his treatment, calling Landon charismatic but difficult. Their clashes weren't only about money. Caroline also recalled Landon making crude or disparaging jokes on set, which she found humiliating. Though they reconciled later, during the show their relationship was often strained. It's ironic because a series built around family values and respect still had reality behind the camera that didn't mirror on-screen storylines. Still, Landon wasn't universally disliked. Many cast members adored him and credited him with guiding their careers. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, often spoke of Landon as a father figure. She was just 10 when the series began, and Landon took her under his wing, protecting her in an industry that could have exploited her. Melissa described him as stern but affectionate, a man who set high standards while giving her stability.